Welcome to another edition of ALN Thursday at 3, everyone. It's very exciting these days, and these three gentlemen are a big part, if not the main reason things are getting so exciting. Daryl Street, Associate Treasurer, Dave Clark, Program Manager, and Richard Dietz, all with the DC Government Office of the Executive Officer, have been our friends and colleagues for about a decade now, and the work that they do just keeps on moving the industry forward. And to our honor and pleasure, they are willing to share their best practices with people, and that's the foundation of our in-person global asset management summit, repeatable success stories, April 27, 28, and 29, with meetings on the 30th. And we'll get into that a little bit, but first, we always like to thank our sponsors. Without Mantech, Onuma Inc., ABS Quality Evaluations, and all of our sponsors, programs like this would not be possible. And it's when we're getting together in person and everyone wants to share their best practices that we have the embarrassment of riches, where everyone wants to be speaking, and suddenly we get overwhelmed with goodness. And one of the good things that's going to be happening is that ALN member strategic leadership strategies, or sorry, I've got that part covered. Solutions. Christina Benty is president. She's the former mayor of Golden, Colorado, and she's flying in for the event to basically be our MC. She got her master's in leadership during her second term as mayor, and now she's going around Canada and now the US to speak from a mayor's point of view why asset management matters. And you guys all know how passionate I am. I think she's even more passionate about asset management, and her speaking skills are incredible. Oh, and as a consultant, now that she's no longer mayor, one of the things she's doing is conducting civility workshops in Canada prior to elections. This person is exactly what we need in Washington, D.C. So it's our pleasure to be bringing her to the U.S. Capitol. She'll be on the 23rd to give us a little bit of a preview, and that's what this program with DC government is a little bit of a preview of what's to be expected next week. And the following week, we have a couple of speakers who will be giving us previews, and we're just working out which ones are going to be on which days. So, all right, all of that taken care of. Oh, one more thing. I'm going to put in the chat the link to register. And this is going to be like a telethon. And we want a certain number of registrations to occur while this program is going on. So I'll put that in there. In the meantime, let's welcome Daryl and Dave and Richard. What a great team you guys have been for so long. Dave, how long has this team been together? Because the chief financial officer has changed some, but this core team has been the same for a while, right?
Yes, the three-headed monster's been in existence most formally since about 2015, 2016. So we've been around for about 10 years together, all pretty much doing the same kinds of things that we're doing now. A couple of us have changed roles a little bit, but we're all still heavily involved with our application called CARS.
And if I can, just a little bit of history. You had already established CARS and you were well on your way, your asset management journey, before you even heard about us. But you had taken 2 years to implement an asset management software program across 100 departments so that you could have a single dashboard view. And Richard's going to be getting into that and how it's evolved. but you were looking for next steps and you found out about the Asset Leadership Network and how we had just launched our A55K professional certification and training from the Andrew James Advisory Group. And you gave us space to have our first course, and you had people from DC government, so you've been right step for step with us from our beginning also.
Well, thanks. We appreciate that. We appreciate your leadership and your support, Michael. Yeah, we started on this journey with some legislation that was put in place by our council and mayor, largely driven by our then CFO. And we started out sort of blindly, and then heard about you guys, and you came in, and as you recall, me asking stupid questions was like, what is it you think you all are bringing to the table? Little did we know how much you would bring to the table and how much support we would get from you all, both directly and indirectly. And we've done all kinds of things together. And I think we in the district, we started out in one place, and we're in another right now, but it's a never ending saga, as you point out. And then we'll discuss a little bit more on the 28th. We want to continue to evolve. We have a couple things in mind. We might give you a sneak preview on the 28th. So we're looking forward to that. And I know that you had nothing to do with it, but we're going to give you credit for the fact that the king is coming to visit Congress on the 28th also. So we're seeing if you have enough pull to get him over to our meeting, Michael.
he'll I'm going to ask him to have the limousine drive by 1101 4th Street Southwest and see if we can get him to wave as he goes by.
Good luck with
But
that.
all right, but let's just talk about that, because one of the things that you said right from the beginning that made me realize that you are the real deal is you said that every 4 years we make sure the road from the White House to Capitol Hill is perfectly paved for that presidential procession. And then you said, why aren't all of the streets in Washington, D.C. paved with that same amount of attention, and that your efforts were to have that happen? And I thought that was a great way to say the value and importance of asset management.
Yeah, thanks for that, Michael. Yeah, as you can well guess, when the inauguration takes place every 4 years, we go to a lot of trouble to be sure that Pennsylvania Avenue and the road up 14th Street is paved and looks perfect for TV and the cameras and for the new president or swearing of the old one, whatever takes place at the inaugural on that particular day, depending upon who's been elected. The object is to be sure that the district puts our best foot forward, and we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars ensuring everything from the manhole covers are right to the street being paved, et cetera. And meanwhile, in other parts of town, the streets are falling apart. And Richard will get into some of this, particularly on the 28th. But, yeah, why can't it all be like that? And why can't it stay like that? So that's the challenge that we have before us. And unfortunately, we don't have as much money as the federal government does to be able to spend on these kind of assets. But if you look out our building, as you well know, Michael, you can look out at Freedom Plaza, and there used to be all kinds of fun fountains, et cetera, over there now. And the White House is actually having those redone, and they'll be set for the 250th birthday of America. So we're excited to be a part of that, and that our general surroundings will get upgraded as a part of all this. So we're all behind it, and anything we can do to maintain or better maintain assets and their service levels, we're all about it.
So you said you don't have the money that the federal government has, and that shapes your thinking. And I think that describes every organization. And our colleagues from Australia who are coming from the Asset Management Council, who are the co-facilitators of the summit, have a country the size of the lower 48, but they only have 20 million taxpayers, where the US has 160 million. They have to be smart. And I think you took that same approach about using minimum resources. So you explain Daryl's role and Richard's role in making you use each dollar to its highest value?
Well, so Richard runs our program on a day-to-day basis, and a lot of people, when we first started out, people were like, "Well, how much of a support staff do we need to make this whole thing work?" And we got some advice that says, "Look, if you have one person and it's the right person, then you'll be good to go." And that right person was Richard Dietz. And Richard has been with the project since day one. We stole him from another agency where he did some facilities maintenance management and did some IT work. And he's an excellent trainer. So we grabbed Richard, and he's been with us in one form or another ever since then. And he is our sole dedicated resource around cars. So he knows how to make it sit up and talk. He has the spreadsheets. He's got the software. He makes everything work for both the mayor's proposed budget and then any revisions that our council takes between the time we get a formal budget as the year develops. We're in the process now of getting the mayor's proposed budget for this year, 27 through 32, just 6-year CIP period. Richard's right in the middle of that. Of course, as you mentioned, we don't have, and I mentioned we don't have as much money as the feds do. We have what we would call enough if we manage it well. And managing it well involves a whole lot of debt service management and how do we pay for stuff with cash and paygo, et cetera. And the guy who is responsible for all of that and more, who single-handedly manages the largest agency in terms of dollar payout of any agency in Washington, D.C., is our associate treasurer, Daryl Street. Daryl was in a slightly different role when we first started cars, and now he's much more directly involved with debt management and making the whole model work and work well. And he'll talk a little bit about some of the changes and what happens when priorities change and it affects the debt cap that we have in place locally. How do we manage all that?
It sounds a little bit about like what we hear from sports teams that have their capital spending maximum. And if they trade this player, they've got to do this with that player. And Daryl, I know, is going to talk about some sports facility assets that are coming up.
Indeed, yes, sir. He loves talking about sports facilities.
So, which direction do you think we should go now, Dave?
I would say let's go to Richard, and Richard will give everybody a little peek. Just first of all, as a little background for those of you who may not know, the District of Columbia got into some financial problems in the late 1900s, as it were. That makes me feel really old to say that, but like back in the 1990s, and the Congress put in place a control board made up of non-federal appointees who literally had to manage every single check and every single expenditure that happened in the district because we reached the status of junk bond status. And literally, I was around in DC in a different role at that point in time. I can remember when the police had to buy gas for their own cars because we couldn't afford gas, and people were literally bringing their own toilet paper from home because we wouldn't pay for toilet paper. So at that point, Congress put in the control board. At the time that disappeared, as it were, and is still on the horizon, they created an independent CFO office. So we are independent from the mayor and independent from the council. We sit right in the middle. So in a way, we have a lot of leverage. Our job is to make sure that there's an adult in the room between the council, the legislative branch, and the executive branch. And it's not an easy place to be. Sometimes you're between a rock and a hard place, but we represent the truth, as it were. But for those of you who are interested in like where we're coming from, we have a lot of leverage, and again, we have no real influence over either body of our government.
You, DC government, the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, helped me understand and maybe even coin the phrase a carrot as big as a stick. So it's not a carrot or a stick. The money is the carrot that's as big as a stick, and you wield it very well.
Well, we try, and I'll just tell one more quick story and then turn it over to Richard. One of the things that when we got started with cars that really sold everybody, nobody wanted to give up their data. We got a letter from the city administrator, went out to all the agencies that said, you got to give up your data. This is a good program. This is what we're going to do. And then we started using the data. We started, as you'll see, with a limited number of agencies because that's where we had the best data. So we really started with a proof of concept, and it's grown from there to include now 100% of all of our assets in the district. And all of that came about because of people like Richard and Daryl, and our ability to push on the council and the mayor's people. We had, I think, the second set of fleet vehicles that we put in there were the fire and EMS vehicles. And they requested X amount for budget. Usually they would just say, we want $2 million, and they would give them some. They go buy whatever they wanted to buy, whether it was ambulances or fire trucks or patrol vehicles, etc. And now we have a better plan. We have the data around it, and they got the budget that they asked for. And then our Metropolitan Police Department came forward, and I got cornered by the chairman of our council one day, and he said, I just went to breakfast with the chief of police, and he says he doesn't have enough patrol cars. Don't you guys have something that manages all this, and don't you model all that? And I said, we do. And he got everything that he was supposed to get and nothing more. That was the end of the conversation. And since then, MPD has been a big advocate of the system. So people became understanding of the fact that money is what it's all about. And if you don't have the data, if you can't sell what it is that you need, and your project doesn't become a priority, you're out. There's no money for you. So it caused people to look a lot deeper than they had used to.
Okay, so the focus of this summit and therefore this preview is repeatable success stories. So we have a formula evolving here. Leadership establishing legislation, which in the private world is policy. So it's got to start from a directive from leadership, and then there's a call to action. In the information age, asset management means information management. So then I believe that's where Richard comes in.
Perfect. It's all you, Richard.
You're muted, and you can share your screen if you want to, but you don't have to.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you. So appreciate it. CARS, we're in our 10th year of our asset management system, and CARS stands for Capital Asset Replacement Scheduling System. We love our acronyms. And so what it is, CARS, it's an asset management system that we tied into other asset management systems. So we turned an asset management system into a capital planning tool. So why did we do this? We did this because there's not enough money to go around. So we implemented scoring, prioritization of a whole slew of methods, and we have more lessons learned than probably anyone out there. And we're actually on our second asset management system because the first one failed, and there's a lesson learned there. So many lessons learned, but this, for me to show you this system, it's actually something I really would need slides and a slide deck. We're going to do that more on the 28th, so I don't want to suck up too much time, because I really could, if you wanted, we could go into
this is a preview. We just want people to be interested enough to come. So perfect. Thank you.
All right. So, but there's more. So condition, green, yellow, red, orange. We like to use condition, and we use condition to predict the future. And we predict the future to try to help our decision makers to make decisions, because there's just not enough money to go around. And our agencies, like for the fire department or the police department, are asking for the world. And so what do our decision makers have to weigh what the agencies are looking at? That's the reports that we give them. They give them some sort of balance to check whether the agency's request is valid. And so we do that for not just fleet, we do it for building, roads. Everything can have a condition, like buildings. Buildings have a useful life for 50 years. Everything has a useful life that can be drilled down into a condition, and love to show you about it more on the 28th.
Excellent. So you said something that I didn't quite realize is that by combining the asset management software that you purchased with the operational management software at each of the 100 departments,
That's
you've
right.
created your own asset management system. And it's because of the interoperability of data exchange between those.
That's right. That's 100% right. So it's an asset management system tied to other asset management systems. And the reason why we do that is the other asset management systems that we have, there's like about 13 on this peacock chart that we'll show you, are all gold star asset management systems run by the agencies and run very well. We don't want to bother with those or interfere with those. We connect directly to them. So fleet, for example, you could take 10 data points of fleet to predict the future. And so we know what those data points are for fleet, age, hours, engine miles, maintenance. We could use that information to determine where that vehicle is in its useful life, and then use that information to then calculate, hey, if you're going to be used this way, right now we're going to say that's the way you're going to be used for the future and predict your expiration. So we're just using data. We know what we want for vehicles. We know what we want for equipment, use age, when you were purchased, useful life. Same with buildings, same with roads. We know the data points we want, and we know what we want to calculate. Again, expiration. And so that's what we're doing with the different assets. We roll the assets up into categories, and then we present those categories into the budget. 16 billion was the last agency request asked. So there's a lot going on, a lot to show.
You provided a nice hint. You said fleet. So the Asset Leadership Network is accused of focusing on facilities far too much. And I defend that by saying, well, everybody can relate to house. Everybody understands buildings. Even farmers need facilities, barns for their things. So, but on April 28th, you're going to be focusing on the application of your system to fleet management. So I think that's really helpful to us. So thank you for picking that set of categories. And you also said something else.
Sorry, just to your point, I'm very proud of this one fact, and get all the 6,000 vehicles that we have onto one page to show our decision makers to make decisions. So that's a lot to get onto one page. Again, to help decision makers make decisions. That's a $600 million request, 6-year request. So it's a big deal, a lot of information on one page. Quite proud of it. So thank you.
Very good. And you said a word that I think leads into Daryl pretty well. You said score, that you score assets. And people like scores. That implies games, and sports is a big part of a municipal identity. Is that a good lead into Daryl?
Sure thing, Mike. I think the important thing to understand is it's sort of the way this works is Richard's excellent management of our CARS system, our asset management application, his ability to work with the executive and the legislative branch in our government to prioritize assets. And then it's sort of my job to come along as sort of the money guy and say, well, we don't have as much money available as everyone would like in terms of, as Richard hinted to, $16 billion, over $16 billion of requests from the agencies for capital, for our capital projects. We weren't able to fit all that in our 6-year capital improvements plan. So the scoring and the prioritization is key and critical to see what we could afford. What that also then tells us is what can't we afford during that period in time? We call that our unmet need. And amongst that unmet need is deferred maintenance. So they were looking at not only what existing assets that the different agencies have identified that we should be able to maintain, we're not able to in that period of time, but what new projects do they think they need for, the district as it's continuing to build out and grow. And even despite the economic challenges, obviously there's always a need for new assets. And so we put this plan together that we produce on an annual basis, and we publish it, make it public, send it to all the elected officials, various stakeholders, like I said, and it's on our website, because it's important to us that we think it's not just a one-time report that sits on a shelf and gathers dust, but we're annually updating that to say, hey, this is the state of the district's capital needs and our assets. But then what you're hinting at is there's a saying, often attributed to Mike Tyson, that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And so we come up with this great plan of how we're going to address all of our unmet needs. And then suddenly projects that we weren't anticipating come out of the blue, different economic opportunities or challenges. So for example, a couple of years ago, our NBA and NHL teams were preparing to move out of the city and across the river into a neighboring jurisdiction. We had to, at the last minute, find a way to come up with money to help invest, to renovate that particular stadium, to incentivize and keep those teams as part important economic driver in our downtown core, to keep that foot traffic that comes with sort of NBA and NHL games that many times a year. And then, as people may have heard in the press, there is another very, very large sports-related project that's slated to happen that I'm currently working on to bring the NFL team, the Washington Commanders, back into the district. And that's going to entail the district investing a substantial amount of money to help redevelop the site, help with the site prep for the new stadium, everything that goes involved in that. Well, obviously, when we were setting up our plan of funding our unmet capital needs, a new football stadium was not part of the mix. And so then it's a question of, how do you prioritize? How do you change out? How do we and my group and our Office of Finance and Treasury find the money, find the space under our statutory debt limits, refinance existing debt, all kind of things like that, to be able to pursue these very important economic development projects for the city, as well as still making sure to leave enough money to try as best we can to address sort of maintaining our core assets in a state of good repair.
Okay, Daryl, we've got a question from another municipal executive. Chris Silkey is the asset manager for Portland, Oregon's Parks and Recreation. Can you explain if or how the system has helped persuade elected officials, political, hold on, I need to close the screen to be able to read the whole thing, appointees away from non-scored insert projects?
That's a fantastic question. I know this is one that Dave and Richard and I have gotten many times. And I guess the best example I can give, and Dave or Richard, please chime in as well. Years ago, when we were early on in this process and setting up CARS and trying to get buy-in from different folks, we had worked with the mayor's team and the various department heads and put together what we thought was a much more data-driven budget, capital budget. But, you never take politics out of this completely. And elected officials, it's their prerogative to be able to change certain projects if they want, pet projects in their area and wards in the district. So there was a particular council member, who shall go unnamed, who, after we had identified and had a very defensible data-driven budget for fleet, just happened to be, where we said, look, these are the vehicles based on all the metrics that Richard discussed, useful life, that need to be replaced as soon as possible, on the schedule, but as soon as possible. This particular elected official decided, well, I'd rather use that money for something else. I don't know, as Dave would like to say, dog parks or whatever in the district that they wanted to use it for. And you know what? As an elected official, it's their prerogative. But what we were able to show for the first time and can now show is, well, Mr. or Mrs. elected official, you can make that choice, but we can quantify now for you the cost of making that choice. And it's going to be public, the cost of making the choice. So what I mean by that is, if you don't replace the vehicles in time for their useful life, then the cost of maintenance goes up on those vehicles. We can project out at a pretty good degree what that extra cost. And you, Mr. or Mrs. elected official, are going to have to find that extra cost in the operating budget somewhere, which, as we all know, electeds are much more sensitive to the operating budget and the program side than they are to capital typically. So if you want to find the money for those additional maintenance costs, then by all means do it. And we were successful, at least that time, in persuading them to leave the money alone for replacement of vehicles based on the information that Richard discussed. I can't say that happens every time. It's not a magic, sort of a magic bullet or panacea. Like, there's always going to be times where elected officials don't follow the plan per se. But I think the ability to quantify the cost of decisions has been a real important one for us. And as generally help to keep the ship going in a straight direction. Yeah.
And that approach works in private sector also. The transparency of the information yields self-correcting decisions. Basically, when they see it, it's the lack of knowledge that allows people to make decisions based on emotions only, because there is no rational confrontation. Does that sound right, Dave?
Yes, that's exactly right. Without them being able to quantify what the impact of any decision they're contemplating, and of course you got to have the data to do that, and you've got to look at the ROIs and the additional operating costs that go into it. And once they start to think about dollars and cents, they get it really, really quickly.
Now, should we tease people with anything about faster or your AI initiatives, or is it premature to talk about those?
Oh, we can talk about AI for a half of a second if you would like. Suffice it to say that we have all kinds of data, and it's easy to score the projects, and you can score them, 1 to 100 or however you want, and then rank them from there, 1 to 1,000, and draw the line wherever the budget will support, and the rest of them fall out. But the question is, did you make the right decision? So we're playing now with some analysis that says what would happen in each year of the CIP with those unmet needs that you heard Richard and Daryl talk about. We have these unmet needs that need to be taken care of. What if you put $50 million into year one and 75 million into year two, and you cut 50 million out of year three, and you emphasize service to our citizens for the assets that need repair the most? Now you get AI working for you, and AI will come back and tell you what kind of decisions you need to make and exactly why you should make those. So it takes the data and makes more sense out of it. So we're excited about that.
Oh, that is great. And that's enough of a hint there. And I could talk with you guys all day long. We're just a little bit over our 30-minute. So I think we did great. I don't care going over time. I'd like you all to be able to say, closing statement, and then we can wrap this up.
Well, thanks for having us, Michael. We appreciate it very much. We're looking forward to your work and the meetings you have, the 27th, 28th, 29th, and 30th. We're looking forward to seeing the King drive by and wave. Well, I'll be there, but it's exciting times. And I think, I really like the informalness of the group, the way you do these Thursday at threes. And I'm hoping that we can just have some conversations. We can tell a little bit more about our story. We can answer some questions, and hopefully we can help some people see where we're at in the journey, and we'll get some ideas from others as well. So we're looking forward to it.
Excellent. Daryl?
Well, I echo Dave's sentiments. Thank you for having us on, Mike, and we look forward to seeing everyone who can attend in person when the meetings are later in April. To echo on one of Dave's points, oftentimes, I think the district is a unique jurisdiction here in the States, and I know you have folks joining in from other countries as well. But even with that uniqueness in terms of how we're set up, not quite a state, but we function in many ways as a state, county, city, school district all rolled together. There are lessons that we can take as well from folks, people who are doing things really well in different jurisdictions, different countries. I know early on we had some discussions with folks in Australia, and I think from New South Wales, if I'm not mistaken, and got some really interesting lessons and lessons learned. And so, I love to think of this as sort of a collaboration, exchange of ideas, so that all of us can get better at learning how to manage and finance our assets.
Before we hear from Richard, I want to emphasize, yes, that what we're trying to do is establish the informal network that allows capital cities to exchange best practices, so that from the capital cities, those best practices can then move throughout the rest of their country. And we really appreciate the fact that you already have 14 sister cities in place, and we're going to reach out and try to get as many of those to interact as possible. Richard?
Hi, yes, thank you. I hope everybody comes and joins us again to see our system. I have a lot to show you. Fleet is what you want to see. You're going to see some amazing things on Fleet and how you can calculate the future with just 10 data points. And we have so many lessons learned. So there's more just to show, just interaction with questions. Again, 10 years of asset management, lots of lessons learned, lots of bumps on the road, and how we've had to deal with them are very valuable. So again, thank you for your time.
Well, thank you to our speakers, and thank you again to our audience, so engaged and interested. We really appreciate all the support. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.